Welcome to this video lecture from JMI's Judeo-Arabic Music Conference, Yalla, which happened at SOAS on February the 9th and 10th, 2020. My name is Gil Karpus, Events and Marketing Manager for the Jewish Music Institute, and in this lecture, we're going to hear from a JMI trustee and research associate at the University of Cambridge, Dr. Vanessa Paloma Elbaz, with her paper that she presented at Yalla titled Sonic Resistance During Nazism, The Role of Judeo-Arabic Songs in the Maghreb.
Hello, I am Vanessa Paloma Elbaz, Research Associate at the University of Cambridge and Peterhouse. This presentation is entitled Sonic Resistance to Nazism, The Role of Judeo-Arabic Songs in the Maghreb. Today's presentation is a modified version of the paper I gave during the Jewish Music Institute's Yalla conference on Judeo-Arabic music this last February at SOAS in London. When we originally launched the idea of the conference, we had no inkling of the cataclysmic changes that were approaching, and I'm delighted that we are presenting a variety of its contributions in the JMI online series, which was launched because of COVID-19 and the changes that it has brought to cultural and educational activities around the world. I particularly want to thank Gil Karpus for all his meticulous work in making the JMI online series happen, and to the whole JMI team for supporting Yalla, which was, I believe, only the beginning of a longer journey. During World War II, the Moroccan Jewish community witnessed the horrors of Nazi Germany, initially from the wave of refugees arriving to Moroccan shores, and the news they read in the international press. Coastal cities like Tangier and Casablanca saw a large influx of refugees fleeing Europe. However, the experience for Jews in Morocco living under the political differences between the Spanish and the French protectorates was to evolve quite differently as the war unfolded in Europe and seeped into North Africa. The minutes of the Jewish community's meetings in Tangier start showing requests from Hungarian musician refugees in 1938 and 1939 for loans to buy instruments in order to make a living teaching lessons while in Tangier. Small anecdotes like these help us understand the local impact that Europe's turmoil brought to Morocco. In midsummer 1940, at the same moment that German forces entered into Paris on June 14th, Spanish military forces entered Tangier, saying they were doing so in order to avoid an imminent Italian invasion. The implication was that this occupation was necessary to maintain the tranquility of the city and its neutrality during the war. However, Franco's fascist government was jumping on the occasion to annex Tangier into the Spanish protectorate, at least in part. Even though we have a written confirmation of allegiance to and from the Spanish with Tangier's Jews, multiple entries from the minutes of the meetings recorded in the Tangier Jewish community junta ledgers attest to the diminishing perimeter of allowed Jewish sounds and expression. On Sunday, June 30, 1940, we read, "By petition of Don Abraham Jacob Laredo, it is decided to send a flyer to the synagogues begging the Parnassim that they should inform all our co-religionaries that the prayers should not be done in a loud voice." The rupture of these acoustic punctuations of sacred Jewish sounds seeping out of synagogue walls and windows unto the streets of the Medina most certainly created a radical silencing to acoustic Jewish presence. The silencing was performed for the non-locals, who would not know the secret knowledge of the location of small synagogues which were hidden behind unmarked walls. The rupture of the habitus of sound, read in an Aristotelian form of habitus, as in a repetition of moral or practical crafts which create a permanent mark on the character. also shows that this rupture of listened sacred Jewish sound would change the city's own expression of its usual social structure. By July 1942, the junta had been dissolved and the ledgers go silent until after the war, demonstrating a radical silencing of official Jewish voices within wartime Tangier. For those in the French protectorate, as was Casablanca, the city that the repertoire we will discuss today hails from, Vichy laws arrived at their doorstep in 1940. This was soon after the racial laws had been enacted in metropolitan France and began to be applied in Morocco. Since Morocco had been a protectorate since 1912, all laws went through the Sultan and were promulgated as dahirs, as official decrees from the local authorities. They were, though, in fact, written by the French authorities, translated into Arabic, and stamped by the Sultan, who had little choice at this point. As the Nazi collaborationist Vichy regime wore on in Morocco, the anti-Semitic laws were fine-tuned, eventually arriving to the decree in 1941, which changed the racial aspects of the laws to not include Muslim descendants of Jews in Morocco, which was effectively contrary to racist Nazi policy. However, as historian Daniel Schroeder has pointed out, this would have been an affront to the Sultan as commander of the faithful. A racial definition of Jews would have meant that Muslim descendants of Jewish converts to Islam would have been defined as Jews, and this was a direct challenge to the Sultan, Mohammed bin Yusuf, because it questioned his sovereignty as Islamic ruler. This was also problematic for the French authorities, because the protectorate was also based on and legitimized by the preservation of the dynasty and its Islamic ruler with his Muslim and Jewish subjects. At first, Jews were prohibited from exercising various professions and attending French schools or living in certain quarters. Eventually, in some cities, such as Casablanca, Jews received a notice asking them to list their properties and financial holdings. Stories such as one I was told during an interview in 2008 show the general fear and apprehension that was palpable within Jewish homes by the early 1940s. One early morning when I was 17, my father woke me up and whispering told me to dig a hole in our backyard in our house while it was still dark. He had collected jewelry, dollars, and gold from family and neighbors, and we buried it there until after the Americans landed. I did not know then, but they had received a circulaire asking them to list all their money, jewelry, and properties. We knew that listing them meant they would soon be confiscated, but His Majesty was against all that. He did all that was possible to stop this. We discussed this all day long around our tables and in our homes. Communal associations such as the Association des Anciens Élèves de l'Alliance Israélite Universelle, or the Association for Former Alliance Israélite Universelle students, were requesting that Jews actively show their support for the Sultan and France during the wartime period. The descriptions of Jewish sonic moments, such as the absolute silencing of meetings, the silencing of synagogal singing present within Tangier's ledgers, the whispering as a father urges an able-bodied adolescent son to quickly dig a pit to hide valuables in a Casablanca villa, the silently loud urging of an organized poster campaign exhorting Jews to actively show support to the authorities, or the loud booming of a racist law through its silent dissemination both on print and in action, help contemporary researchers understand constriction and expansion of the territoriality of official and non-official voices within Moroccan Jewish spaces. This immediate positioning of Jewish acoustic public silencing, while reiterating a voiced allegiance with the military leadership, demonstrates the tension within their ranks. The sonic recalibration of spoken and sung communication of both religious and official Jewish voices demonstrates how spoken, sung, and printed voices had varying volumes in the public and private spheres, which were raised and lowered according to their perceived reception. On November 8, 1942, Allied forces landed on 3 points on the Moroccan Atlantic coast, and by November 10, the Americans surrounded the port of Casablanca. Surrendered that very day, soon American forces were parading their tanks in the streets of the city. However, the Vichy laws in Morocco were not rescinded immediately with the Allied landing, contrary to what many of the Jewish residents who were suffering from these laws had hoped. The Allied landing lifted the specter of imminent physical danger from Morocco's urban Jews, who were the most vulnerable during this period. It also had dramatic sonic impact, as while the war continued, we have examples of a plethora of sung historical poems in Judeo-Arabic and Hebrew, as well as a Megillat Hitler and a Haggadah de Hitler. Even with Vichy anti-Semitic laws in place and government censorship of printed material, Jewish printers in Rabat and Casablanca circulated this form of sonic resistance, which made its way into schools, synagogues, and homes. Through language, liturgical poetic tropes, and melodies, Maghrebi Jews used this form of encoded communication to rally for unity and tenacity, while often expressing it in a language understood by both Muslims and Jews. I believe that this outpouring of anti-Nazi repertoire during the war was a sonic resistance enacted by the Jews for the creation of an acoustic force field of power. Songs such as these were written throughout the Maghreb, and many examples are found in Tunisia and Morocco. As musicologist Suzanne Cusick explains in her study on acoustic aggression post-9/11 in American detention centers, the oppressed use the acoustic as a force field of power. Since human subjectivity is produced through the interaction of sensory reception and sensory perceptible response, thus do we turn space into place, and place into intelligible, navigable worlds. We are interpolated in a symbolic order into language and into social relations. In our case, in wartime Morocco, Jews who were still subject to racist laws carved out a space in their social relations with Muslims, and maybe against the French, with the very fact of choosing to write and sing anti-Hitler songs in Judeo-Arabic, a language understood by all Moroccan Muslims and by very few French. These songs functioned as the reconstruction of a symbolic order that existed within what the Europeans called the indigenous spaces of the city, in a non-European Jewish space of belonging and vocal expression. Today, I will discuss the Qasida de Hitler, a long historical poem recounting Hitler's rise to power and his conquest of various European countries and the gathering of Allied forces against him. The Qasida is a sung Arabic poetic form in quatrains, which became a terrain of popular Jewish poets in Morocco. Often used during impromptu gatherings or communal celebrations, it responds to social and cultural needs. Examples about daily and local issues, such as the recipe for a Sabbath stew, the devastating 1960 earthquake in Agadir, or a duel between the holidays of Passover and Sukkot, show the variety in themes and tone. It falls within the tradition of writing and singing historical poems of local importance, which was widely practiced in Judeo-Spanish, Judeo-Arabic, and Judeo-Amazigh communities in Morocco. I first came across this piece in the Jewish Museum of Casablanca in 2011, when the anthropologist Oren Kozansky was digitizing a series of printed matter from the mid-20th century that he had found in Rabat and brought to the museum in the interest of creating a resource that is now named the Rabat Geniza, and which is now available online. In June 2014, I recorded Jacob Wiesmann, an important baitan, or liturgical poetry singer from Casablanca, singing the qsida one late afternoon in his home. This recording was done in preparation for an event that was held at the residence of the American Consul General to Casablanca, which had been the home where Winston Churchill had stayed during the secret AMFA conference with FDR in preparation for Operation Torch. We organized various events that week to discuss Holocaust education in Morocco, together with the United Nations Holocaust Education Director, the Mimuna Association, and Khoya Jewish Morocco Sound Archive. I thought then, as I continue thinking now, that these texts in Judeo-Arabic are some of the best entry ports to discussing the wartime experience of Jews with young Arabic speakers today. The fact that they are songs in Arabic and melodies that are local can cut through apprehensions created by anti-Semitic propaganda and Holocaust deniers that prey on younger generations in the Arab world. The Qsida's front pages states that it was written by Matitya ben Simhon of Mogador, or modern Essaouira. Let us now listen to Jacob Wiesmann's reading of the beginning of the introductory page.
قصيدة دي هتلر. هاد القصيدة أنا ماتيا بن سمحون نظمتها وعلى هتلر جبدتها على ما دوجوا على اليهود بديتها وقاديتها وعلى يد المخزن تبعتها وأنا غير تفكيرة عملتها على النيش دي عمل معنا شي متوراخ ومع المروك كلها نرغبكم يا قارينها ردوا بالكم تنشاوها.
Since it was printed in Casablanca, the question of its circulation comes up. It possibly circulated mostly in Casablanca and Rabat, but we do not know if Matitya ben Simhon lived in Mogador and printed it in Casablanca, or was just referring to his city of origin as a matter of introduction. However, it could have been easily taken from city to city by individuals who came across the 4-page poem and wanted to share it with their communities. We will have to see if other copies surface in different Moroccan cities, now that efforts to preserve Jewish intellectual heritage are starting to get underway, in addition to the long-standing efforts to preserve material culture and monuments in Morocco. Looking at the beginning of the poem, one immediately notices that there is a separation of two different texts on the first page. The Qsida is divided in two sections, one which is in Hebrew and one which is in Judeo-Arabic. The first section is a Michamocha Piyut, or a liturgical poem in Hebrew, which is fashioned in the style of Michamocha Piyutim, a style of sacred poetry developed after Yehuda Halevi's original Michamocha Piyut from 12th century Al-Andalus, and still sung in many traditional Sephardi synagogues on Shabbat Zachor, the Sabbath of remembrance, which is before the holiday of Purim. This is significant because that Shabbat is the day when every man, woman, and child is commanded to go to synagogue in order to hear the public reading of the biblical portion about Amalek's aggression and desire to destroy the Jewish people. Purim is a holiday that celebrates the deliverance of the Jews from destruction by Haman, who was an advisor to the king of Persia in the 5th century BCE. In this case, we see our poet collapsing time from the biblical Amalek to Haman in Persia through the poetic structure of 12th century Hebrew Golden Age literature and arriving to a contemporary story of potential destruction and deliverance from Hitler and the Nazis. Jews in Morocco have a long tradition of adding extra Purim days to celebrate their deliverance from potential destruction. In 1578, La Batalla de los Tres Reyes, or as it's called, the Battle of Wed el Mahazin, was fought between the Portuguese crown and two Moroccan sultans. Deposed Sultan Abu Abdullah allied with Portuguese King Sebastião I to recover his throne, which had been usurped by his uncle, the Emir Abd al-Malik. All three died during the battle, with the Portuguese suffering a crippling military defeat, meaning that Christianity had lost on Moroccan soil. The body of the Portuguese king was never recovered, and until today in Portugal, there is a myth around Sebastião I, who, according to popular lore, will arrive alive, riding on a cloud from heaven. However, his death and the Portuguese loss of this strategic battle was seen as a salvation for the Jewish population, which had been expulsed from or forcibly converted in Christian lands less than a century before. It was considered to be such a salvation that a special holiday called El Purim de los Cristianos was put in place through all the Judeo-Spanish-speaking communities of Morocco until the 21st century. In early August, a special Megillah scroll is read, recounting the salvation from destruction once again, very much like the scroll of Esther, which is read every spring around the world in every Jewish community. This Purim is a site-specific Purim, celebrating a similar deliverance from destruction, the potential destruction of the Inquisition, if the Christians had arrived to Moroccan shores. Another Purim celebrated in Morocco is called El Purim de las Bombas, and recounts the French bombardment of Tangier on August 6, 1844, and the miraculous deliverance of the Jewish community, despite the destruction caused by the bombing. Both of these Purims were celebrated with this special scroll, the Megillah, or a document, a ketubah, telling the story, in addition to psalms and liturgical prayers. This explains the Michamocha as the header of this qsida, in the tradition of placing the deliverance from destruction in familiar forms and rituals that evoke similar previous salvations. The author also uses the formulaic textual beginning and ending Michamocha Endomelach and Michamocha Ba'elim Adonai, and the same rhyme structure used by Halevi. Let's listen to the portion of Yaakov Wiesman reading the Michamocha introduction.
מי כמוך אבא רחמן, ואין דומה לך האל הנאמן, מסיל תמיד עם לא אלמן, מיד אויבך אדוני. בימי היטלר האויב השודד, הוא ורעו מוסוליני, הבוגד, חשבו להשמיד ולאבד את עם אדוני. ב-11 לנובמבר, גמלני חסדים, על יד הארי הנאהבים, על כן אני אשיר שירים על גאולת עם אדוני. אדון חסדיך אזכירה, ולנכדיך תמיד אשירה, אזי לשמך אזמרה, מכמוך באלים אדוני.
The second section of the Qsida is in Judeo-Arabic and has 36 quatrains, symbolizing life, as 36 is twice the gematria, or the numerical value for the word for life, chai, in Hebrew, which is 18. Mr. Ben Simchon recounts the rise to power of Hitler and his conquest of Austria, Czechoslovakia, Holland, Romania, Greece, Poland, and Hungary, and how the Allies rose up against him. Listen now to the first stanza of the Qsida.
سوفو هتلر نعملت ليه مشاد روسيا وزبدها عليه ما نواس باين تغلب عليه وتردوه من الخاسرين.
He later mentions the English, Americans, and French as working together to subdue the enemy, which is in itself interesting because he was obviously living in Vichy-ruled Protectorate Morocco during the war, and must have known quite well that the French collaborated with the Nazis, but may have wanted to whitewash the truth in light of the censor, and possibly even of his or his own family's fate after the war. There is a prayer for divine aid to Roosevelt, Churchill, Stalin, and de Gaulle, and two whole stanzas dedicated to a blessing for the Sultan, his son Moulay Hassan, and the whole royal family. We will listen now to some of these.
روزفلت شورشيل وستالين وجميع أصحابهم كاملين تعاونهم يا رب العالمين حتى يغلبوا الأديان كاملين. دقول غيره خاطره كل واحد يبقى بخاطره هو هم دين خاطره حكام على فرنسا كاملين. صاحبتها هي فرنسيا مولات الحق والحرية ربي يزيد لها في العناية يغلبها على الأديان كاملين. الله ينصر سيدنا السلطان حفيد مولاي الحسن ويعيش ديما في الأمان مع ولاده كاملين.
He ends the qasida by praying for the reunion of the free Jewish people in Palestine. I realized years later, after listening to Mr. Wiesmann's recording, that he himself had sonically impressed his own feelings of familiarity within the section in Arabic, and that in the relaxed environment of his home, the subconscious relationship to the medieval piyut inspired by Michamocha was familiar because of liturgical textual tropes that reoccur within it, but there was an added vocal turn in his enjoyment of the older Arabic words and hearing the history of World War II through this language of the inner Jewish sphere. In conclusion, the negotiation of liturgical poetic tropes in Hebrew and storytelling in the vernacular, in this case in Judeo-Arabic, is one which has existed within Moroccan and other communities for generations. It is one more demonstration of how Jewish communities have intertwined their own local language and music together with wider Jewish traditions, such as the Sephardi medieval Michamocha Piyut template, and the wider Jewish world story of Purim as archetype of deliverance from destruction. The deployment of all these elements served as the frames that Matitya ben Simchon used to re-establish elements of strong Jewish sonic space while the world was still at war, his own community's sonic resistance to the Nazis. Thank you.
ونكونوا متحدين ونرجعوا من المحررين. أنا من هاد القصية اسمي هو متاتيا بن سمحون هي الكنية تعاونوا يا رب العالمين.